Glad you're all glad you're all here this morning. I heard a little voice that said, maybe you heard this too, recording in progress. And I thought, well, okay, that's not my voice, but all right, great. Well, I want to welcome you and introduce you to my friend and colleague Tommy Shapard, who is with us this morning. Tommy's been at Hendricks Avenue Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Florida, for uh, a number of years. Before that, Second Baptist Church in Lubbock, often referred to as simply Second B, right, Tommy? I've often heard that nomenclature from people like Hardy Clemens when he was this side of Jordan, God rest his soul, and others. Um, Tommy may not even know this, and I'll tell you a little bit of an intersection. Tommy's formative years were spent at Broadway Baptist Church in Fort Worth. And he's one of those blessed folk who came under the influence of Tom Stoker and Al Travis and Jack Coldiron. In my last year of seminary at Southwestern Seminary, back in the day, our first son, Christopher, was born in Fort Worth, and I gave up going to a little weekend Baptist church, the First Baptist Church of Little Elm, Texas. And it was just as the name sort of tells you everything you need to know, the First Baptist Church of Little Elm, Texas. But it was 60 miles from Dallas, and it just wasn't really feasible to do that with a newborn. So I resigned my position. I was facing writing a paper and a conducting recital and oral exams and all that anyway. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give myself some space. And so I started to attend in the season of Lent of 1983. I began attending Broadway Baptist Church in Fort Worth, and my mind and heart and soul kind of did this, because I was a kid from a little Baptist church in North Georgia, and I had never been among Baptists who worship like this. And for the first time, I understood it, and I'm thinking about this in retrospect, Buddy Sheridan's idea of Baptist churches that are out of the Charleston tradition. And I don't know, I met God in a different way at Broadway Baptist Church in Fort Worth, Tommy. It really, really turned out to be a transformative few months, really. So that is the milieu in which Tommy grew up. And I would also add this: I had the privilege of working with Tommy's mother at Wilshire in my early days here. She's a wonderful and gifted minister, and we still miss her from our Wilshire staff. So Tommy, welcome to Polyphony today. I know you have a lot of irons in the fire with church and your college teaching and young children at home and all that, but we're so glad you're here and look forward to what you have to tell us about your recent project at SMU, because it is absolutely intriguing. It's worth reading. And just for fun, I want to read the title one more time, because it's a title that only a committee could love. But it's significant. I Can't Breathe: Toward a Pneumatology of Singing and Missional Musicking for Racial Justice in Jacksonville, Florida. That's fantastic. Welcome, Tommy. Tell us what you got for us.
Yeah. Thank you, Doug, and thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be able to talk with colleagues and friends, and to be able to share with you this morning. It's such a privilege to be able to do that. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for being here this morning. I feel honored and humbled all at the same time. So thank you very much. I did start at Broadway as a child. I grew up there, and I like to joke that Broadway ruined me, and that I was spoiled the rest of my, heard Al Travis play the organ as a child, and so I have a hard time listening to people play the organ now. So these kind of things, I did not understand what I was growing up under, and how unusual situation and context. But I say that because it does give some context to my story, to this project, really, and the way it has shaped me, how my journey as from a child into the last couple decades in ministry has really influenced this project. What I'd like to share is, we'll share the link if I don't know, Doug, if that was shared to the thesis document or not, but we can do that afterwards. I don't necessarily want to go into every detail of it. You can read it on your own. But I want to share some context and some pieces of the story that helped birth this project. And I think many of you are probably experiencing some similar questions, perhaps, in your context, in your career, as I have been. Maybe perhaps they're different in flavor, but around 2016, 2017, HAB is, that's Hendrecks Avenue Baptist Church. I'll just continue to refer to it as HAB, is an aging congregation. We're in the middle of a neighborhood. We are, we are that different Baptist church in Jacksonville. So people do travel from all around to us, but it's an aging congregation. The average age of the choir is about 65. We have 10 to 15 youth who the current group right now loves to sing and participate in worship and do a number of things. And I'll get back to that group in a moment. But the model of the program church, the program, the music department, and that kind of thing, I've noticed how that has run up against the culture of people's lifestyles within the last decade, 10 to 15 years, but really was becoming more noticeable around 2016, 2017. So I had a lot of questions about what's next. What are we going to, what's this church going to look like? What's the music ministry going to look like in about 10 years? And I still don't know. I mean, but I have a better idea in terms of our direction at HAB and where we're headed. So hang on to that. That was one piece that was in my brain. Another piece was the issue of racial justice. I was on the edge of different conversations here at the church. Our missional component here in Jacksonville, some conversations that were taking place nationally within CBF. My wife works for Together for Hope, and which is seeking to eradicate hunger in rural areas. And so that piece was hitting me in a number of ways personally. I was also teaching some sacred music courses at the University of North Florida, and a student there caught my attention, wonderful opera singer, and he was interning at an organization called Don't Miss a Beat, which is here in town. They are there to help kids in the Brooklyn and Riverside area of Jacksonville, an area close to La Villa, which is where James Weldon Johnson grew up, and where he taught and where he wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing. And they, Don't Miss a Beat uses the arts to help kids not miss a beat in school, to avoid detention, to avoid suspension, and thus falling behind in school and dropping out. This is what studies were showing. Ulysses Owens and his family who lead Don't Miss a Beat. And they have become this holistic service to families over there, helping children with tutoring, with food, with clothing. It's an amazing, amazing work that they do over there, but it stems from the fine arts. Ulysses is a now a friend of mine. He is a child of Jacksonville. He went to Douglas Anderson School of the Arts and was in the first jazz class at Juilliard School of Music. He continues to teach an ensemble there, as well as private drum lessons. He's a percussionist. So a student at UNF in my sacred music class interned at Don't Miss a Beat, and he mentioned to me the work that they do. And I thought, why have I not heard of this organization? I've been in Jacksonville 10 years. I've not heard of Don't Miss a Beat. I should know of Don't Miss a Beat. I'm a musician in town. I'm a minister who cares about what's happening in our community. Why don't I know Ulysses, and why don't I know Don't Miss a Beat? That bothered me that I didn't know that. I felt like that was my fault. I felt like I should know that. So I contacted Ulysses, and we formed a friendship immediately. We both have a passion for music, but we also have a passion for social justice and for bettering our community on all fronts. And I said, Ulysses, I want to help. I want to do whatever you need me to do. Well, he threw me in the fire. He threw me in front of his all-stars. They're triple threats. They are being prepared. They do incredible work. They go to New York City. A few of them just went to college. They were first kids to attend college in their family. Amazing work. So I did some coaching with them. I learned a lot from them. There's a lot of kind of cross-cultural learning that was happening at that point. And so I tell you this story because it starts with relationship, and that's the missional idea here. In my title, you see missional musicking, and musicking is a term that comes from Christopher Small, an ethnomusicologist. It's a broad term that takes into account everything that has to happen, everything that supports music making. So it's not just the conductor, it's not just the singer, it's not just the instrumentalist. It's also the person who comes to hear and listen. It's the person in the sound booth, it's the roadie, it's the bus driver, it's the ticket sales person. So musicking encapsulates everything around the activity of music making. It takes into account the culture and the social aspect of music making. So missional musicking is this idea of forming relationships through music making. And that may be through advocacy, that may be through actually making music together. It may be an invitation to go join forces with something in the community. I felt like, as a musician that has grown up in a white, moderate Baptist tradition, that I needed to get off the sidelines, that I needed to get off the periphery of these conversations around racial tensions, racial justice, and the relationships of different communities. Jacksonville is still a segregated community in terms of some folks live in this part of town, and other folks live in this part of town. And Jacksonville has enormous land. It's one of the, I think it's the largest city by land. So you're spread out, and you rarely see another side of town. And without talking about it, without trying to figure out, oh, well, we need to have this conversation first, or I need to go do this first, or I need to ask permission. I just went and made a friend and made a new colleague. And individually, I created that relationship. So I formed that bond with Don't Miss a Beat with Ulysses Owens Jr. and his family, while at the same time taking a position at Florida State College, Jacksonville, directing choirs, while at the same time trying to think through what to do at Hendricks Avenue Baptist Church for the next 10 years. And so out of this convergence of events, ideas, prayer, I began to take risks that were not always successful, that sometimes went nowhere. But at the same time, I saw new ideas blossom and new life in ministry. I saw new life in me. And I saw the beginnings of what ministry might look like for us here in Jacksonville and at Hendricks Avenue Baptist Church. I'm gonna jump ahead into this model of ministry that I have kind of gone back and placed over what happened. So it's not like I set out with this model and tried to make it work. It was really, it's just kind of a practical theology exercise brought to life. And so reflecting back on all of these things coming together, forming partnerships between a college, a church, don't miss a beat, to make way for musicking at shared concerts, to have Black teenage singers, dancers, musicians join us at Hendricks Avenue Baptist Church, for us to go over to their community center, for the All-Stars to join us on stage at the Wilson Center at Florida State College with our choir, for us to combine. We even combined with guest artist Ken Miedema, who I know you know that name. He has a Black Lives Kyrie that is simple, but so powerful. And so we joined the All-Stars with the Florida State College Chorale, and we had a joint concert, but that was perhaps the peak of that night. So all of this formed, and we also went out, I should say, to into the community for some interfaith rallies, for vigils. We had a vigil for immigrants. There's also one where we had in the community, it was a rally and a vigil for people who were victims of gun violence. And it was out in a park in downtown Jacksonville. And if that sounds frightening to you, to take your musicking into the public square, it should. I was scared. And it's still a growing edge in terms of, we're going to take a group to go sing with other people at a rally, at a vigil, in the name of Jesus. And we did. Let me jump to the model first and then come back to how that worked and how it didn't work. So I think the question I was asking was, what's God requiring of me? Which led me to Micah 6:6-8. What does the Lord require? So to do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with God. And the scripture is not intended to be used this way, but it opened up a model for me, a kind of approach that is a broader look at music making in the church. So walking humbly with God, our sanctuary music, all the music that happens within our sanctuary, worship, concerts, partnerships with people in the community. We also have a partnership with the Ritz Chamber Players. The Ritz Theater was in La Villa. It's where the height of Black music happened within the 19th century. post-Civil War. Some huge names came through there. Ma Rainey, if you've seen the recent movie on Ma Rainey, she started here in Jacksonville, right in La Villa. And so the Ritz has this great history. So the Ritz chamber players, started by Terrence Patterson, oboe player who was from Jacksonville, grew up here, went off to school, came back, and their mission is to raise awareness about the lack of diversity within our symphonies. And I think 1% of our symphony players are of color. And so their mission is to raise awareness. And they use our sanctuary as their home stage. And he brings in these incredible musicians from New York City, from Chicago, from London, and just offer these free concerts here for the community. And it's absolutely amazing. I mean, you'd pay big bucks for these people. And so, you know, these kinds of things that you all have in your own churches, that you have in your sanctuaries, in your communities, I consider that under the sanctuary music. And that's one prong of it. Then the love kindness, that's the pastoral musicking. That's pastoral musicking. We had one, many of you do this through hymns in your own church, your senior adult choirs. You already do this, right? All these things you already do in different ways. This is just a way to expand it and see the larger picture. But one thing we started doing with our youth group, we turned our youth choir into the HAB Singers, which is now an intergenerational group. Anybody can join that, but at the heart of it are our students. And they participate in each of these categories. You know, they kind of represent these things. But the pastoral music piece that they do is we'll take hymnals into what we used to. A lot of this is pre-pandemic, mind you. And so we would meet, learn 3 hymns, 3 favorite hymns of a homebound member. And we'd go visit this homebound member, take a hymnal. So the person could also open up the hymnal and sing with us. So we weren't going to perform. We were going to just go sing with this person around a bed, around a couch, maybe with a spouse or some children, older children. So we would sing favorite hymns. We would learn about this person, about their history at HAB. We would say a prayer, and then naturally a social thing would just kind of happen before we left, and we'd keep it to about 30 minutes. But it was also a way to teach our younger people hymns and also their importance to people. So we were offering multiple things that were happening in that event, in those occasions. We haven't started that back up for obvious reasons, but we will. And our students really miss it. They miss that. The third piece is do justice. Well, how do you do justice through music making? Well, you can sing about it. And some of us do, right? In our hymn text, in our anthems. And if you don't have that piece of, that stream within your repertoire, I would, recommend adding that when it's appropriate. But how do we actually do this within the community? And this was a piece of what I was getting at in my paper, and it's really a reflection of what was happening in 2017, 18, 19. So I looked at two pieces that informed me. One is the philosophy of community music. I can send you a reference for an introduction to community music. It's a whole philosophy that emphasizes participation, community building through music making. And that happens in a number of ways. Not just community building, say, within your choir, but community building outside your walls. And so our HAB singers would go out and sing with the All-Stars. They went and sang with people instead of for people. And they were there to help lead short songs at vigils, at rallies. And there's video of this within the paper. And it's more or less making music together. That aspect of music making that brings us closer together. It's common ground, where, well, how do I make music with folks across town who may treat church music in a totally different way than we do? My singers aren't going to do black gospel, and the black choir across the way, they're not going to sing Mark Hayes. I know you'll sing other things than Mark Hayes, but that's just the example I brought up. And I like Mark Hayes, so if you know Mark Hayes, I'm not taking a shot. But you get the picture. And so one thing I did use was the Justice Choir Songbook. If you're not familiar with the Justice Choir Songbook, I can send that link to you. It's not sacred so much, but some of the themes have gospel themes in them. And when you're at a vigil for immigrants, for gun violence, for COVID deaths, that's going to be an interfaith occasion. It is not a Christian occasion. You're going to have people from all walks of life there. So to be able to bring people together to form community, the gospel theme can be right in the text, but it doesn't have to speak specifically of Christ or Christian kind of ideals, right? So there were some songs we used there from the Justice Choir Songbook, and a few other pieces, Draw the Circle Wide, and some other things that you all would know, but short pieces that you can sing memorized and that other people can learn quickly. And there's a skill in that, and that there's times when that gets really, really scary, because we like to have the piano near us, right? Or we like to have people, some ringers nearby. Or how do we teach by rote? You teach by rote in children's choir a lot, maybe, but you're teaching adults outside that may number 100. So how do you do that? There's a skill in that that's rather frightening, and you got to be good at it. You have to know what you're singing. So you all have the chops to do that, I'm sure, and it just takes practice. But all I have mentioned so far is within this model, and this kind of three-pronged model that has led to an expansion, this justice idea, this kind of, how do we do this kind of prophetic musicking and expand the music ministry, the purpose of what we do as ministers of music. It's an idea that doesn't have to be replicated exactly, but it perhaps creates some questions in your mind. What's happening in my community where our musicians can connect with and form relationships with people we may not know and that may need support? And perhaps this isn't why you go do this, but will probably reshape us in some ways. And it's a calling. It's really a calling of going into the community, not to just go perform for people. We all do that, right? We can go to the nursing home, we can go to the prison and sing our songs. This is a little bit more radical approach in terms of a robust relational music making. What can we sing together? Not for the sake of performance, but for the sake of building bridges, for the sake of advocacy, for the sake of, wait, you're from that white church that has a lot of money, and we've never really walked, in through your door, and all we know is some preconceived notions of what Baptists are about, white Baptists are about in the South. So trying to break down those walls. And my work, just out of, if you're interested in it, the audience, the intended audience is white musicians, right? I'm speaking to you all about what's happening here. In other words, I'm not trying to talk to Black musicians to say, here's how we do racial justice. So that's an important piece, important step to in the conversation for racial justice. I'm doing what's called the white work, right? Because you all may or may not be in that place. Hopefully you are, in terms of stepping up for your Black brother and sister in different ways. But we have work to do within our own churches. We have work to do among ourselves as well. But some of that is just by doing. It's just by doing, and it may just be you making friends with someone else in another part of town. As simple as that. It does not have to be this radical big step. It might lead to that. And you all know how God works. And sometimes that can be scary, leading you down paths that you never thought you'd go down. But it has been good work. It has been meaningful work. And it has been enlightening that music making has taken me this way. It comes with, and then I'll wrap up, it comes with, you know, I love choral music. I love Western art music. It's what I studied. It's what I do. There is an angle of that can be dangerous if we elevate it. We can elevate it to where we edge more and more towards that being God, some kind of idolatry, where we put music up on, a pedestal above all things. That can also become a cultural step in terms of superiority. And hey, this music is the end all be all. If it's not this, it's lesser than. That has some really negative cultural impacts if we're not careful. And so there's a side of that too that has come into my radar, where it's always been there, but I'm becoming more and more intentional to pay attention to different kinds of musics, right, as ethnomusicologists might say, and that have their worth within their own culture, and what that looks like as things cross and mix up in our cities.
Tommy, at the risk of getting you off topic,
Yeah.
I want to ask a question here that
Yep.
intersects with a presentation that M. Roger Holland II made to us a number of months ago. He's a Black musician, teaches at University of Denver. The Spirituals Project, he's the director of that, and is a composer with GIA. Catholic by background, was in New York for a time, gig musician on Broadway, really remarkable thinker. We had him come speak to the group a number of months ago about the challenging conversation being had in some circles, maybe music education more than church music, about cultural appropriation. So in an effort to, I'm looking for a word, and I'm not sure this is the right one, equalize Western music with other musics. In other words, to bring everything to par. One approach might be that we want to have more diverse repertoire, even in appropriate ways for our specific worship locations. But with the good intent behind that, I actually had a choir member to challenge me about whether that was culturally appropriate.
Sure.
I wonder if, because you have an ethnomusicology background and you've really spent a lot of time, do you have any thoughts about that question? I don't want to bog you down in it, but I think it was Roger Holland's presentation was very even-handed, and he encouraged us to sing all musics. That's sort of the short version of his response. Not everyone from all communities has that same attitude, and that's okay. Just curious. Don't want to get us too far off topic. Want to get you back on track, but I just can't help but ask that question.
Yeah, no, it's always a question and a continuing kind of practice. Um, I I I'm I think the most appropriate thing is to um, know your music, study the music, and know the composer and know the intent of that music, and teach your choir, your musicians about that history, about the performance practice, and perhaps even have a write up and a blurb in the congregation about it, and acknowledge you're doing something that's outside our cultural norm that belongs to somebody else's culture, and do that. With that said, I think it's also important to include that voice within our worship, to make sure that voice is within what we do on Sunday mornings. It's also important to support Black musicians and composers.
Right.
And how can we do that if we can't perform the music?
Mm-hmm.
So Rollo Dilworth makes a good point of saying, look, I had to study Bach and Handel, and that's none of our cultures, so we had to go and learn what that was about. So you can also come and learn about Black history, Black music, Black performance practice, and what that looks like, and what that sounds like, and even go another step further, invite Black musicians to join you, and even maybe a clinician, and have that person, he or she, conduct your choir that Sunday. So these are some things that go to that question.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Doug, I think we're running on time here, so yeah. I'm going to go ahead and stop and answer any questions that people might have.
Tommy, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I just want to say thank you for your work. You challenge me. I don't want to speak for the team, but all of us, I'm sure, have encountered, African-American congregations that we've partnered with. We've shared pulpits, shared split choirs, shared choir experiences, and South Main is engaged in that right now with the Church Without Walls. Obviously, Steve Wells is being president. George Floyd's funeral was a lightning rod shot for our church into that, and we've been a part of some interesting groups and discussions. So this is what you were doing, though, in terms of the justice aspect of this, is a very different. To imagine myself standing with a choir of singers teaching music at a vigil or an event in town is that's a big step. That's a big step, and I commend you in that, and I'm challenged in that. And I will tell you guys that once you, maybe for you, Tommy, it's a snowball. Once you step, it just continues to take on a new life. I had a church choir member last night say, we've always done musicals at our church, and it's been a part of our ministry here on every other year. And she came to me last night and said, I think we should partner with the Church Without Walls and do Hairspray. And I'm like, that's a great idea, but that it's like, that's what starts to happen. But you have challenged me, and my brain is already just firing with ideas and thoughts using Micah 6:8 as a great model. This is great. So just wanted to thank you for your work, and probably will be calling you pretty soon with more thoughts.
Thanks, Kerry.
And Doug, I wrote down some of the books that were mentioned on that conversation with Holland. I'm going to send these in the chat real quick. I just wrote them down and I pulled them up real quick. There's some good research on that conversation.
Nice. Thank you, Kerry. Well, Tommy, thank you so much. I know there's so much more we could explore, and maybe folks, this is one of those topics they need to sit with. I was, you think? I noticed that some of your timeline on this it seems to even go back to 2016. So in other words, what I'm hearing you say is this didn't happen overnight. This had a this had a gestation period, if you will. And, the Quakers have a saying, way leads to way. And it sounds like your relationship with Ulysses, then other doors opened out of that initial relationship, which is just a beautiful model, even if we just take one simple step, as you recommended. And maybe that is a first step, to reach out to a brother or sister church musician or community musician.
Yeah, and it gets the brain firing, and it creates the HAB singers. It created other things that happened that then became also we musicked in other ways, not just in the justice piece, but it helped create new ways of musicking within the church and with our church family as well. So yes. And if anybody, I'll send the link out to the document. If you read it, you have further questions, you'd like to talk with me about ideas, that kind of thing, I'd welcome that and love for that to happen. So,
Tommy, if you don't mind, would you just send that document or the link to the document in the email that went out to everybody, and that way even folks who are not on this call would get it. I think people would really be interested if you're willing to share that with us.
I can, and I'll send it over this afternoon when I get some free time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Again, thank you so much, friend, colleague Tommy Shapard. Really appreciate your time with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, want to tell you, in 2 weeks, Ryan Heritage will lead our session again, and it be an opportunity for us to just gather up and have some conversation. So maybe it's a coffee and conversation time. Maybe if there's enough of us, we'll do some breakout rooms. We've not done that in a while. We're going to try to continue to mix up our format with top flight presenters, top shelf presenters. Sorry for the liquor reference this early in the day. Am I getting any laughter? I can't hear you. Oh, wait, I see those smiles. Sorry. Yeah, all right. He'll be back at 11, folks. And we want to mix up the great sessions like this with just the opportunity to connect, to commune, to communicate, just see how you're doing. How are you thriving? How's your soul, today? And so appreciate Ryan doing some of this past summer. So 2 weeks, again, we'll stay with the new time, which is 10:30 Eastern, 9:30 Central, coffee and conversation, Thursday, September the 23rd. Today, I just want to finish with, I feel like lately when I finish these sessions, it's like I've done a book review, but I can't, I just find things. I read widely. I bet you do too. But does everyone know this little book by Tom Troger, Music as Prayer? Friend gave it to me as I was looking at the inscription a few years ago. A choir president who had served 2 years. The choir president gave me. I should have been giving her a gift. She gave me this gift at the end of her 2-year term as choir president. Music is Prayer by Tom Troger, and I commend it to you. It's not very old. It's, I think, back 2014, and I'd like to read just a couple of paragraphs, a lovely section under the subheading, The Necessity of Beauty. The Necessity of Beauty. And again, in alliance with Tommy's talk today, I hope that our definition of beauty is very broad, very diverse, very wide. So I'll just read a little bit of Tom Troger. And I'll have to change my glasses. This is obviously a few years ago. During this time of economic distress, maybe right in pandemic distress, during this time of distress, I find myself reading the business section of the newspaper with a degree of interest. I have never before taken much notice of such matters. Being a rank amateur when it comes to economics, I'm often puzzled by the technical terms. So I plow through editorials and analyses, hoping to gain at least a small grasp of the causes and possible solutions. But there's always a sharp debate about policies and strategies, and there are even profounder questions about whether or not we ought to try to return to the consumer-based economy that has fed our prosperity since World War II. And then he talks about a musical event that he went to, and then this. Beauty is irrelevant if we are trying to figure out how to navigate these perilous times and how to make wise decisions about our personal finances and our direction as a nation. You could graph financial returns on a chart, but beauty does not lend itself to quantification. You can make a judgment on the soundness of an investment based on a reliable rate of return over time, but beauty does not give you a dividend check to cash. Yet beauty has everything to do with reclaiming and sustaining a sense of the eternal significance of human life. Christ said to the tempter when he was asked to turn stones into bread, "One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Every word of God includes not only the petition, "Give us this day our daily bread," but also the prayer of the psalmist, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. Of course we live by bread. Of course the financial crunch matters to all of us. But we need beauty as much as we need bread. Beauty is balm to the wounded and world-wearied souls that are coming to church during these troubled times. When we play or sing or direct beautiful music, we are offering a ministry of healing. Beauty does nothing for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but it lifts the heart on wings of hope and wonder. Tom Troger, Music is Prayer, a little short book. Might be worth picking up and reading alongside the Psalms, Psalm of the Day. So anyway, good to be with you. Hope that you're doing well. Hope you're doing good work. I know you're doing good work. Hope you're taking care of yourself so that you'll do well as do good. Cecil Sherman used to say that. Tommy, I don't know if you remember that. I don't know. I remember Cecil used to say that. Okay. Well, I think that's all for today. Hope you'll stay in touch, and hope you'll be back with us in a couple of weeks for Coffee and Conversation led by Ryan Heritage. All right? Have a good week, folks.
Have a good one.
See ya.
Thank you, Tommy.